All right, here we go. Joshua 3. Wow. Moving right through it. Joshua 3. The covenant of promise. I named this one. So I'm just going to read the whole chapter and then we'll go through it. Joshua 3. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out for Arcadia Grove and came to Jordan, he and all the children of Israel, and lodged there before they crossed over. So it was after 3 days that the officers went through the camp. And they commanded the people, saying, when you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, and the priests, the Levites, bearing it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, that you may know the way by which you must go, for you have not passed this way before. Then Joshua said to the people, sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Then Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, take up the ark of the covenant and cross over before the people. So they took up the ark of the covenant and went before the people. And the Lord said to Joshua, this day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. You shall command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, saying, when you have come to the edge of the water of the Jordan, you shall stand in the Jordan. So Joshua said to the children of Israel, come here and hear the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, by this you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, the Perizzites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, 1 man from each tribe. And it shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, that the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off, the waters that shall come down from upstream, and they shall stand as a heap. And so it was, when the people set out from their camp to cross over the Jordan with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people, and as those who bore the ark came to the Jordan, the feet of the priests who bore the ark dipped in the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks during the whole time of harvest, that the waters which came down from upstream stood still, and rose in a heap very far at Adam, the city that is beside Zaratan. So the waters that went down into the sea of Arabah, the salt sea, failed, and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. Then the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all of Israel crossed over on dry ground until all the people had crossed completely over the Jordan. Ooh. We got miracles going this one. All right. I think you can sum up the plight of the Hebrews in these 3 phrases. One is, all of me, none of God. Second one, some of me, some of God. Third one, none of me, all of God. I'll go over them. All of me, none of God. That's self-reliance. And that is Jacob. Jacob went and did things on his own, saw this, I'm going to go ahead and do this, until he wrestled with God, and his hip was put out of joint. And he hobbled the rest of his life as a remembrance to it. So all of me and none of God is self-reliance. And God will wrestle with you, and guess whose hip gets put out of joint? Not his, yours. Some of me and some of God is self-effort plus God. Okay? So it's kind of like Jesus plus whatever. God plus self-effort. And that's Moses in Egypt. Moses saw the plight of his people, and he killed an Egyptian to deliver the Hebrews. Well, what are you going to do, one at a time? How many Egyptians do you need to kill? So that's self-effort plus God. A little bit of me, a little bit of him. That's kind of how we are in America a lot of times. I got to help God get where he's going. None of me and all of God is death to self and reliance on God. And that's where we are right now with Joshua. Because Joshua, he is coming into the promised land, and he's like, where's Moses? Moses is dead. I'm going to work with you now. And guess what? I'm going to do wonders that you've never seen before. And you guys have to die, and you have to rely on me. And that's what God's telling them. So the crossing of the Jordan signaled the tribe's Interdependence Day. So last week we celebrated Independence Day, which we really need to call it Interdependence Day with God. But that's what this is. The crossing of the Jordan is the start of interdependence. It's the end of a life that's lived by effort. They wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. They had to go out and pick up the manna. They had to go and set the tents up and all these different things. Effort, effort, effort. Well, now they're coming in, and it's the life that is lived and the end of effort and the beginning of lives lived by faith and obedience. He's going to test them in this new land. And they have to go through a river. And the river is impossibility. There's no way that you're going to walk through a river when it's flooding over without getting swept downstream. And so that's what God does a lot of times. It's like we're doing all this stuff and effort on our parts and effort and, me plus God. And then something impossible is in front of us, and we have got to be totally reliant on God. No more effort. Now, it's not that you just sit there and, go in your hammock and swing and sip a mint julep or something. It's, got to place all my trust and all my faith in God to do it. There's nobody can do this. So, the effort and disobedience is the 40 years of wandering. That unbelieving generation had to die off. And this generation of faith and obedience had to come through the Jordan. Trusting in God's direction, God's ways, God's means. They're going to face enemies that they never faced before. All these ites. So next week, Tony's going to take you through getting rid of the ites in your life. So, now, there is a center object to this whole faith walk. And it's called the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark is mentioned 10 times in this chapter. So remember, anything that's mentioned a lot of times, you got to kind of like, oh, okay, what's going on here? What is this Ark of the Covenant? And it's called the Ark of the Covenant because God is making a covenant with them and has made one. And you're going to see the difference between what is a contract and what's a covenant, because a lot of times in our culture, we draw up all these contracts and we break the contracts instead of looking at it as a covenant with the Lord. So, here's the ark. It represents the presence of God. That is what is in that ark. Their most sacred possession that they had. It was an oblong chest of Arcadia wood. It was 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 broad and deep, and it was overlaid within and without with gold. They had rings on each side, and they had poles inserted, and they were carried by the priests. And that's how it was to be carried. Not on an old Philistine cart, not on somebody's back, not with a bunch of guys touching it and holding it like a coffin. It was to be held with those poles on the priest's shoulders. And it was veiled with badger skin and blue cloth. The mercy seat was on the top. It had the cherubs facing one another with the wingtips touching, and they faced the center of the ark, which is the mercy seat. There's all kinds of analogies to those. So, we've talked about this before. There's 3 items enclosed in the Ark of the Covenant. And they're in Hebrews 9, and I'll just go through them. There's 2 tablets there. And they have a divine autograph on them with the finger of God, because God wrote on those tablets. And they are inscribed a covenant with his people. That was the 10 Commandments. The next thing is there's a jar of manna. And the jar of manna was 40 years of provision when they had no vision. They had no vision of where they were going. They were wandering around, and for 40 years, God gave them manna out of the desert. And they got twice as much on Friday because they couldn't go out and pick it on Saturday. And then it started up again on Sunday. Can you imagine? This stuff that looks like coriander, I don't know, it was, just flat on the sand. They would pick it up and get it, and everybody got what they needed. So if you had a family of 4, you got enough in your basket. If you were a widow lady and you couldn't get as much, you always had enough. Always had enough. Okay? And then the third thing was Aaron's rod, and it budded almond blossoms. And we know that that's the first to bloom in the spring in Israel. And it was basically a stick that came to life and had all these blossoms on it. And they are all pointed to the Messiah. So, the tablets, Jesus wrote on the ground and left his autograph. And because he didn't condemn an adulteress. So he came to fulfill the law. So I thought that was interesting. God writes on these tablets of stone, and Jesus writes in sand, but it's a little autograph down there. No condemning. Because Jesus came to fulfill the law and the prophets. Therefore, we're not supposed to get beat up with the law. The bread of heaven came down. He said he offered his body as a sacrifice. I'm the bread that came down from heaven. That's the manna to feed. And like when we take communion, we pray over that. Symbolically, the body and blood of Christ, the juice and the bread. And then the rod, Aaron's rod, that was dead and came to life, Jesus died on a tree. But that tree, as dead as it was, brought life to all of us. And he also endured the rod of God, because that's where he was smote on that tree for our sins. And ultimately, he was resurrected to bring new life. Just like that stick came to life. So, verse 3 says something very interesting. It says, keep your eyes. They said, when you see the ark, and then the priest carrying it, bearing it, and after it, you shall set out from your place and go after it. People were to fix their eyes on the ark as it led them through the Jordan. Do you remember Hebrews 12:2? Fix your eyes on Jesus, the author and finisher of your faith, the Alpha and the Omega. When you step into the waters of impossibilities, like home, work, family, temptations, right? You've got to look unto Jesus and keep your eyes on Jesus. And that Greek word there doesn't mean just kind of a glance, because, our attention span, I think they say now for commercials is 5 seconds. That's why the commercials always come on 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds, because that's about people's attention span. And that's what's happened during our age of media. We have a short attention span. The Greek word here means undivided attention, looking away from all distractions to fix one's gaze on one object. See, a lot of times we have distractions and we end up stopping and arguing with the distractions instead of keeping our eyes on Jesus. And that's when we get off our path. But if you keep your eyes on Jesus, like they told him, keep your eyes on the ark when you're going through. Because I would suppose when the priest went down and the waters start to part, you kind of get lost. But these guys are holding that ark up there, and just kind of keep your eyes on that ark as they're going through that water. The priests carry the ark on their shoulders. And I think there's an illustration there of the leaders need to shoulder the responsibility of lifting up Jesus to those who follow. We've got to present Jesus. What kind of Jesus do we present to the world? I'm going to go on a plane tomorrow, and I always make a funny comment about if somebody sitting next to me, and if I want to talk to them, I'll tell them that what do you do for a living? Oh, I do marriage counseling. Oh, there's 4 hours of marriage counseling on the plane, from here to Houston. If I don't, I say I'm in assurance, and they think it's insurance, and they don't talk to you because they think you're an insurance salesman or something, If I don't know and I say I'm a minister, you don't know what you're going to get there. Sometimes they want to talk, or they'll tell you that, they had a bad time with God and they don't believe in God anymore, and then you get into these debates and stuff like that and talk. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. See who sits next to me. I don't know. So the priests are the leaders. They're supposed to shoulder the responsibility of lifting Jesus up, lifting up the ark. Yes,